Hey, what's going on, guys? Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. I'm going to talk today about the American Civil War. It's usually not a topic of mine that I discuss, but I'm going to talk about the Irish Brigade. Okay, the Irish that fought for the Union in the Civil War, and predominantly most of them fought in the Irish Brigade. And it was made up of about five different regiments, but the predominant regiment was the 69th New York Regiment, and the the predominant commander of that was Colonel Michael Corcoran. Now, Corcoran, before the Civil War started, the Prince of Wales went to go meet the U.S. leader. Now, the U.S. and Britain were not allies at the time, but they were trying some diplomatic solutions. But they were not allies at the time, and they were an enemy. And Britain had was oppressing Ireland at the time, and potato famines had swept the country, and it was just a horrible set of situations. So, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Corcoran said, "I cannot march in this parade for the Prince of Wales," and because of that, he was jailed for insubordination. But when the Confederates fired on Fort Sumter, he offered his services to the Union, so the charges were dropped, and he was released from prison. And the Irish Brigade fought in the Battle of Bull Run, or First Bull Run, the Battle of First Manassas is what it's also called. And they basically kept the Union Army from being annihilated in that battle. Stonewall Jackson commanded the Confederate forces in that battle, and he charged the retreating Union soldiers, but the Irish Brigade stood their ground, and they retreated well under pressure, and they made a strategic retreat. They didn't make a panic retreat. So, and the line the Irish Brigade held in the Battle of Bull Run, General Stonewall Jackson, he could not turn that line. And that's why General Jackson called the Irish Brigade that damn brigade, because he had a hard time with the Irish Brigade. They were that tough, and they were that efficient, and they were that effective. And the reason the Irish in the North were loyal to the USA was because the Confederates had fired on Fort Sumter, because Ireland was trying to get its independence from England. They were actually very sympathetic to the Confederate cause and for independence. But when the Confederates fired on Fort Sumter, the Irish said that's enough. And throughout neighborhoods in the Northeast, throughout the Irish neighborhoods, the American flags went up, and many Irish offered their services. Also, America allowed the Irish to practice their Catholic faith. They did not have any interference from the government. Now, they did have some interference for some private citizens, particularly the Know Nothing Party. They would attack Irish Catholics and then say, "I don't know anything about it," when questioned by police. But the U.S. government allowed the Irish to practice their Catholic faith freely, and the Irish soldiers could vote. They didn't have that luxury when they were in Ireland under English rule. So even though they wanted to return home to Ireland, many did, and wanted to free Ireland, they appreciated what America had given them. And the commander of the entire Irish Brigade, by and large, was General Thomas Marr. He was first sent into exile in Tasmania, an island off Australia, because at the time Australia was basically a prison colony. The British sent a lot of their prisoners to Australia. It was a prison colony that the British owned. And then after that, but he was allowed to get his freedom, and he came to the United States. And he was opposed to the issue of slavery, and he wanted to command the brigade. He wanted to command the Irish Brigade. And where the Irish Brigade really shined was Marie's Heights in Fredericksburg, December 1862. That showcased in the movie Gods and Generals. They charged a wall that was defended well by the Confederates, particularly the 24th Georgia Regiment, which was comprised of Irish Confederates. But the Irish Brigade, even though they didn't achieve their objective, they charged so valiantly, so bravely, that they won an applause from the Confederate soldiers. And the Confederate soldiers cheered and applauded them for their bravery. And the guy who led the charge was Lieutenant Colonel St. Clair Mulholland. He commanded the 116th Pennsylvania Regiment, and after the war, he went on to become chief of police in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Before the war, he was heavily into painting and into art. But after the war, he became chief of police in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and he was a very brave and effective commander. And also, the Irish Brigade, shortly after Fredericksburg, they They saved a lot of Union cannons in the Battle of Chancellorsville. In the Battle of Chancellorsville, Stonewall Jackson surprised a lot of the Union soldiers and almost annihilated them at Chancellorsville, but the Irish Brigade kept their cool and were able to secure a lot of cannons and kept a lot of cannons from falling into Confederate hands. That's the testimony of the Irish Brigade right there. And they did not want assimilation. They still saw themselves as Irish, but they wanted acceptance. And they felt loyalty to America because of the freedom that America gave them. They tried to invade Canada after the Civil War, and they tried to tell England, you give up Canada, you give up Ireland, we'll give up Canada, but that was to no avail. But Ireland did win its independence from the UK in 1922. Like I said, every country does something that every country does things they're not proud of. I don't think many British nowadays are proud of what they did to Ireland back then. I was proud that America took in these Irish refugees and allowed the Irish refugees to be free. Now, there was discrimination in America, particularly from individual American citizens. A prime example: more Union soldiers in the Civil War died of disease than on the battlefield, and the ratio was 2-1. But for the Irish Brigade, it was reversed. More Irish soldiers died in the battlefield than of disease, and that was a rarity. But the Irish Brigade were mainly kind of used as the suicide brigade. But they usually prevailed, and they never lost one of their flags. They never lost one of their flags. Their flags were always intact, and they made it a point to not let the enemy capture their flags. Each regiment had its own individual flags, but the flags were usually green, and they had a Celtic harp in the center of it. And so God bless the Fighting Irish. They're called the Fighting Irish because the Fighting Irish actually did love combat. They loved a good battle. That Celtic warrior culture was alive and well in the Irish Brigade. And God bless the Fighting Irish. So anyway, hope everybody's doing well. Take care. God bless and bye-bye. Bye-bye.